Let's start with why food storage is so important. A well-organized pantry isn't just about emergency preparedness. It's also a practical tool for your everyday life. Here are a few key benefits. You can save money. Buying in bulk or during sales and storing food properly reduces waste and stretches your grocery budget. That is so important in this day and age. It reduces stress. Imagine not having to run to the store every week because your pantry is stocked with everything you need. And emergency preparedness. From natural disasters to unexpected supply chain issues, a well-stocked pantry provides peace of mind. I'll share a quick personal story. Last winter, our area experienced a snowstorm. Thanks to my preserved foods like bone broth, dehydrated vegetables, canned foods, freeze-dried foods, we didn't have to worry about leaving the house for groceries. We stayed warm, well-fed, and stress-free during a pretty chaotic time. This also happened during COVID, when the grocery stores were running out of food and people were panicking. We didn't have to worry because I had this stockpile down here. Now, I'm only showing you a little bit of the freeze-dried and canned foods, but I actually have quite a bit of wheat berries that I can grind for fresh flour. I have pastas and a lot of other shelf-stable items that I keep down here, and it prevents me from having to go to the grocery store during times when people are panicking because of weather, panicking because of what might be going on in the world, and also during those times when foods are really expensive and there's no good sales going on. Now, let's talk about the foundation of good food storage: the environment, the containers, and most importantly, rotation. The environment. You just saw where I keep some of my canned goods. So the food needs to be stored in a cool, dark, and dry place. While it may have looked very light to you, that is because I had a light turned on down there so that we could easily see what was going on. We do have lights in our food storage, but that is simply to turn on and off as we need them. They are not left on all the time. Heat, light, and moisture can cause food to spoil or lose its nutritional value. That includes foods that are canned. It can actually heat can actually cause the jars to come unsealed. And so can the other issues. Moisture can cause them to grow mold on the outside. I have seen that many times over the years. We have a whole house dehumidifier down in that area to control some of the moisture. So, and again, light is just something you really want to avoid other than when you need it to find what it is you're looking for. Avoid storing food in garages or attics because these spaces often have extreme temperature fluctuations. We use our basement, which we have had redone, and like I said, there is a dehumidifier down there. It's a pretty even temperature all year round, and it seems to work really well for us. Containers. Always transfer dry goods like rice, beans, and pasta from their original packaging into airtight, pest-proof containers. Now, I'm going to tell you, if it's a smaller item, like dehydrated food, that I feel like I'm going to have trouble getting out of the jar because I use a lot of half-gallon mason jars because they're glass. And I feel like glass is the most pest-proof thing that I can get. So if it's an item that I feel like might end up being a little sticky, because, you know, some dehydrated foods are, I will put that in either a vacuum sealed bag and put the vacuum sealed bag down in the jar. Or at the very least, I will use a Ziploc bag and press all of the air out of it. But for things like pasta, beans, rice, you usually don't have any problem. You can put a couple food grade oxygen absorbers or silica gel packets. I don't know that they're called silica gel, but that's the best way I know to explain that to you. But you want to be sure it's food grade if you're going to put that in there. You do want to consider using oxygen absorbers to extend the shelf life of items like grains or dehydrated foods. And for liquids like broths or sauces, you can use freezer-safe containers with proportion sizes for convenience. But to be completely honest with you, if it's a broth or a sauce like spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, whatever, that I can, I will can it, but you want to be sure that you understand the difference between using a water bath or a cold pack canner and a pressure canner. It's very, very important to preserve your foods in the proper way so that you don't end up having a problem later on. Now, rotation. You want to follow the FIFO method. That's the first in, first out. This means using the oldest items first and replacing them with new ones. You want to label everything with dates as well as what the item is. It's a small step, but it makes a big difference in avoiding waste because believe me, you're going to forget. Sometimes I use stickers to do that, and I may even put a piece of tape over the sticker. I may use freezer tape. But my very favorite way to do it is to use a permanent marker and write on the lid of the container because, let's face it, if it's a canned item, that lid is going to be thrown away and not any good. If it's a plastic lid or a glass jar and it's something that I want to reuse, that's when I will use a sticker or a freezer tape, which does seem to adhere and last better than any stickers I found. You can also put a piece of paper and put it inside the jar. If it's a dry item like pasta, put it right on the top of the jar. Sometimes I will even cut off the instructions. And if I'm concerned about the paper touching my food because maybe it's a store-bought item and I don't have any way to sterilize that, they make these little tiny baggies. You can buy them in the jewelry section at craft stores. And you can fold up that label and you can put it inside that little Ziploc baggie and put it right at the top of your jar, and then you can pull it out when you need it and you can actually look at it that way. But the most important thing, label the date, label the item, and put your newest food to the back and your oldest food to the front, and this includes store-bought foods. So also freezer foods, be sure you label those because once they're frozen, they all look the same. Now, let's explore 3 essential food preservation methods: canning, dehydrating, and freezing. And we will talk a little bit about freeze drying too, which is the 4th. Canning is great for low acid foods like meats and vegetables as long as you use a pressure canner. And high acid foods like fruits or jams using a water bath canner. It saves freezer space and gives you shelf-stable options. I know it says 12 months, 1 year, basically, in all the new canning books, but sometimes that stuff will last 1 to 5 years. The key is to make sure you can it properly. You want to check that lid and make sure you've got a solid seal. If that seal comes loose, if that seal doesn't pop when you take it off, it's better to get rid of the food. I don't suggest feeding it to an animal because if it has come loose, it could have botulism and you wouldn't want to make anyone, including your pet, sick. And another safety tip, always sterilize jars and check seals before storing. Now, I know the new canning jars, they say, oh, you don't need to sterilize them. I still do. Safety first, people. That is the most important thing. And I know there's a lot of rebel canning groups and people say, well, I've done this and I've done that and so on and so forth. it's always, always best to follow the current food safety instructions. And here is something that I found out when I started asking questions. The pH of food has actually changed. And that is what has caused this issue with all the guidelines being updated and things that used to be safe to can no longer being safe. Now, I know that some people know how to check the pH and they have a little bit more food science background, but if you're just starting out and you don't know this stuff, please get the most recent edition of one of the canning books, or even go online to the National Center for Food Preservation and use an approved canning recipe. Because again, you don't want to make anybody sick. Okay, dehydrating. This is perfect for fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Dehydrated foods are lightweight, space-saving, and easy to store. For example, I love making apple chips and dehydrated vegetables, and you can even make dehydrated soup mixes or the ingredients for pot pie, things like your carrots, your peas, things like that. You can dehydrate and you can have it there. You can buy freeze-dried chicken to put in that. You can buy freeze-dried cream. You can buy freeze-dried butter. And you can make your mixes up and just have to dump and add your liquid. And then, of course, your topping, your pie crust or your crescent rolls or whatever you're going to use. These dehydrated items are healthy snacks and easy meal bases. Finally, freezing. Again, if you don't can, freezing is good for bone broth, meats, prepared meals. There's a lot of freezer meals that you can make and put them in the freezer and just pull them out and bake them. They're a lot healthier for you than some of the store-bought options because you know what went in them. And you can control things like salts and sugars or completely omit them if that's what you want. Portioning is the key. You want to freeze in meal-sized portions to save time during busy weeks. So freezing also works great if you do any sous vide cooking, because you can put your meal together and you can freeze it right there in that sous vide bag, and then you can just pull it out and thaw it. Or I know some people put the frozen bag right in their sous vide. What I have read from people that have tested it both ways, the better quality is to cook it from thawed, but you can do either way, whatever works best for you. Now, if you're just starting your food storage journey, here are 10 essentials to focus on. And if you don't like something, you don't have to have it in your food storage. Remember that. Things like rice, beans, pasta, sugar, salt, canned vegetables, canned meats, dehydrated fruits, bone broth, peanut butter. And here's a bonus tip. In my book, 101 Self-Sufficiency Tips, I provide a week-by-week breakdown of what's likely on sale throughout the year so you can stock up on these items at the best price. Now, I'm going to add a couple other things that are in my food storage that I highly recommend. I have a wheat grinder, so I keep wheat berries on hand. But I also keep flour on hand. Now, things like flour, sugar, wheat berries, anything, cake mixes, anything that is a powdered mix or a flour, things that can get bugs in them. If you've ever gone in your pantry and opened up something and there's been bugs inside, anything like that, I put in a freezer bag and I drop in my freezer for at least 30 days. If I have freezer room, I will keep my freezer full of stuff exactly like that. Be sure it's in a freezer bag. The reason is a stocked freezer is going to use a little less electricity. So it would be better to fill it up with things like that than to have it empty. But the other reason is 30 days in the freezer will kill any kind of bug eggs that may be in your flour, maybe on your wheat berries, maybe in your cake mix boxes. I know that sounds really disgusting, but we've all seen where you open something up and bugs have hatched. So freezing it for at least 30 days is the best way. And then you can take it out. You can remove it from that freezer bag. You can reuse that freezer bag. And you can put it down in your food storage. Normally, when I remove something from the freezer, I take it out of the freezer bag. I leave it set on my countertop or my table until it comes to room temperature, and then I will move it on down into food storage. Now, let's answer some common questions and address mistakes people often make with food storage. The first one is, do I need a pressure canner or is water bath canning enough? You need both. You need a pressure canner, you need a water bath canner. Water bath canning works for high acid foods, but a pressure canner is essential for low acid foods to prevent botulism. Now, I know a lot of people are scared of pressure canners. I can tell you I've had a pressure canner blow up on me twice. Both times it was user error. You have to make sure that seal is good. It's best to replace it once a year if you don't know how to tell. If your pressure canner is leaking any kind of liquid around the lid, you definitely need to replace the seal. Don't try to open the lid once it is on the stove and it is trying to build up pressure or actually do its job of canning. You want to wait until that little button drops down or your pressure turns to 0. And then it's always best to wait about 5 minutes. Make sure all that pressure is gone, because you want 0 pressure when you go to open that lid, or you will have a problem. And how do I keep pests out of my pantry? Okay, you can transfer items to airtight containers immediately. Like I said, use your freezer to freeze anything that could contain bug eggs. And you can use bay leaves or diatomaceous earth as natural pest deterrents. Some common mistakes to avoid. Excuse me a minute. Not labeling food with dates or the name of the item. Storing food in areas with temperature fluctuations. Or overstocking without a rotation system in place. Remember, you don't want to hoard food. You want to rotate your food, and you want to use it up and replace it with fresh. And that is the best way to run a pantry and make sure that you're always eating the best, freshest, most nutritious foods. Thank you for joining me today as we explore the secrets to food storage. I hope you're feeling inspired to take a closer look at your pantry and start implementing these tips right away. If you're ready to dive deeper into self-sufficiency, grab a copy of my book, 101 Self-Sufficiency Tips. It's full of practical advice to help you master food storage, pantry organization, and more. And don't miss my live mini class, Food Preservation for Self-Sufficient Living. In just 90 minutes, we'll cover canning, dehydrating, and pantry planning in greater detail. You'll find links to both the book and the class in the description below. Finally, let's continue the conversation in my free Facebook group, Homesteading and Prepping, Learning, Living, Loving Self-Sufficiency. I'll include that link below as well. Share your food storage tips, ask questions, and connect with others on the same journey. I invite you to ask questions in the group. I invite you to ask questions in the comments below. Until next time, happy prepping.